Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to No More, No Less. I'm Mike Chikeen, and today in the virtual studio, I have with me Jay Zigmont. Jay is the founder and CEO of Childfree Wealth, a life and financial planning firm dedicated to helping child-free and permanently childless people. Childfree Wealth is the first and currently only life and financial planning firm dedicated to serving child-free people. Jay is a certified financial planner, Childfree Wealth Specialist, and author of the book Portraits of Childfree Wealth, and his upcoming book, The Childfree Guide to Life and Money. He's also the host of the Childfree Wealth podcast. He has been featured in Fortune, Forbes, MarketWatch, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, CNBC, and many more publications. So without further ado, Jay Zigmont, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. With that type of intro, I should bring you around to introduce me to different places. You give the whole spiel.
Well, you know what? It's actually really hard to say child-free that many times. So I don't know that I would be a good person to do that.
Well, and then people go, well, what does that mean? And child-free, but yeah, I get you.
Right. Well, I think it is a pretty bold niche for a financial planner. So I guess I want to start with, we live in a very pro-natalist, very pro-family society. So for my first question, I guess, is, are there enough child-free people out there for you to scale this business?
Well, so here's the numbers. In the U.S., we don't have great numbers, but there was a study in Michigan. They found that somewhere around 20% of adults over 18 are child-free, meaning by choice. They've chosen not to have kids, never going to have kids. And another 5% are childless, not by choice. So really that means there's about 25% of the U.S. that are child-free or permanently childless. If I'm the only financial planning firm dedicated to serving child-free folks, as far as I know, and I'm serving 25% of the U.S., I don't have a problem. That's just a huge number. I mean, in comparison, that same study in Michigan found somewhere around 8% of the population was LGBTQ+. So we're 3 times the size of that community. And there's a lot of overlap between the communities.
Right. Wow, that's fascinating. I never thought the number would have been that big. Well, obviously you say 18 to whatever are people that are eventually going to be parents or whatnot. So I would assume in some realms, you'll meet people when they're younger and take them on as clients and then keep them as they build families?
No. So when we talk child-free, we mean specifically people who don't have kids and don't plan on ever having kids. Give you an example. In my book, I actually have people at 21 getting sterilized. So, I mean, this is not like, hey, we don't have kids yet. It is, We've decided that's not in our life. Or for some people, it's not by choice, whether it's for medical reasons or other things.
Right. Okay. Super interesting. Okay. So I guess then, how would you look at someone that is child-free opposed to someone that does have children? Maybe they have one and they're done, or one and they plan to get more. How does that really change how you're going to look at a financial landscape for them?
Yeah, so the way we say it is living a life of child-free wealth means you have time, money, and freedom to do what you enjoy. Doesn't mean you're rich. So there's this assumption that you don't have kids and like this check comes out of the air and makes you rich all of a sudden because no. Okay, there are still people that are struggling that are child-free. There are still people that are doing well that are child-free. But it does change your life choices. The way we look at it is you actually have to plan for your life first, then your finances. If you take 2 parents' financial plans, they're actually very similar. There's a standard, what we call the standard life script. You go to school, you get married, you have kids, you buy a house, you work 25 years, you save for retirement, you pass on the next generation, save for college, all that. The only difference between 2 parents' plans is the numbers, how fast we're doing it or how much money we're saving in many cases. For child-free folks, there is no script. It's not like, oh, we're going to go do this with our life. And the vast majority of child-free folks don't want to pass on money to the next generation as a priority. So if you're going to do that, you end up embracing something closer to a die with zero, where you're like, hey, I got to bring my net worth down. and it starts changing all of the basic assumptions around finance.
The die with zero one is really interesting, and I never really thought about that as it pertains to having children or not, because there are some, parents out there that I've spoken to, even the older generations, that have thought like, yeah, I'm going to help my kids. These are more affluent households, obviously, but I'm going to help my kids buy a house or start a business and give them a chunk of cash. But at the end of the day, I want to die with nothing, because I want to enjoy all the money that I've earned over my lifetime. So how would you consult someone with the sort of die with zero concept in mind?
Yeah, so keep in mind, most of the financial rules assume you want to pass that money to the next generation.
Sure.
So like even like the 4% safe withdrawal rate assumes you want to keep the principal. Monte Carlo simulations all are for solving not to have zero.
Right.
So it like screws up the whole system. Like there's these biases, you mentioned it, that are built in there. So we have to think about it differently. The way we do die with zero is, the first thing is we solve for long-term care. We figure out a solution, whether it's out of pocket or insurance for long-term care, put off Social Security till 70, put a little safety net of money. You're not truly going to die with zero, but like most of it.
Right.
Then we set guardrails, and we're really setting guardrails around how much you have to spend. And this is one of those things, like I've actually tracked that we spend more time with our clients talking about spending money than saving money. Because I have clients, they might be 30, 40, they got 3, 4, 5 million. By the time they die, they have 20 or 30 million. That's a $20 million problem to them, because it's going to a generation they don't care about. The way I say it from my life is, my nephews get what's left over. If they get 10 grand or 100 grand, that's fine. If they get $1 million, I made a mistake, because I could have helped them throughout their life, or I could have used the money given away or done whatever it was, rather than just passing it on my estate. So it really is a completely different way of thinking. And when you tie that into child-free folks really not making retirement a goal, where they're going to cut back on work, we have a process we call file for independence, live early. Instead, if you're not going to retire, you're not going to pass the money to the next generation, like all of the assumptions get thrown out, and you have to build a new plan.
Wow. You said something about don't care about the next generation. And did you mean more because they don't have kids, so there's no generation of their DNA to pass on? Or most people you see in that scenario aren't even thinking about how to give some of that money to the next generation, like productively, charities
So
or whatnot?
if you actually look at it, if you want to see a group that actually understands people, anyone in the philanthropic world, begging for money, they've actually figured out child-free people give away more money. It's just, they're already marketing to us, because percentage wise, we're like, sure, we'll give it to charities. And what's happening is, if you're going to give it to charities, you want to do that during your lifetime, because you get tax breaks during your lifetime. If you give it away in your estate, you get nothing out of it.
Right.
So we're being more mindful about that. It's not necessarily like, hey, I don't care about the other generations. It's just a different set of priorities. What happens is, for parents, often they get to a point where like they have enough money, they're good, their kids are good, but they still keep working because like, well, I can make my kids' lives better, or my grandkids, or whatever else it is. For us, we don't. So we have to actually work on these questions like, what's the point of life, and why are we doing this? And what do we really want out of our life a whole lot earlier?
Yeah, and when you first started this, because I don't know how long you've been doing the child-free, I won't say angle, but you know what I mean, but like, how are the conversations different than, let's say, when you're approaching a more standard family dynamic for clients?
Yeah, by the way, I'm going to call you out on this. When you say family dynamic, one of the things I always call out for people, we have families, we just don't have kids. Okay, it's just a different, alternative family structures. Other things.
Right, fair enough.
And when I started, so I went to become a CFP. And the thing that surprised me is, there's absolutely zero mention in any of the CFP literature of having no kids. There's pre-kids, post-kids, empty nest. But it just doesn't exist.
Right.
So I started looking at it going like, are we weird? And I was really asked about me and my wife, and we're weird. And we have 2 PhDs, and we sit around at night talking about research studies. So we're kind of weird, but like, are we weird for being child free? And what happens is, the answer is no. There's a large child free population. We're normal within that subset. When I started, I actually originally had my firm. I had 2 websites and 2 names, one for parents, one for the child free folks. And eventually I was like, let's just focus on my niche and, get there. And what I found is, as I've dove deep into this, I do a lot of podcasts. A lot of times people will reflect on it and go, okay, child free folks are trying to figure out meaning of life. where do I want to go? Trying to let their life drive their finances, trying not to let their finances drive their life. They're trying to think about long-term care and end of life issues. And a lot of folks go, well, parents should worry about that too. I'm like, you're right. We just as child-free folks know we have to because we're kind of forced in that direction. And it's just a different approach. I mean, everybody says in finance, something like 80% of your success is behavioral. Well, that's where we spend our time. We're helping people on how do you think about money in a different light because everything says you have to do it this one way.
Right.
The real truth is everybody should be having their own individual plan that reflects them and their life goals. It's just easy to fall into the standard script and standard boxes.
Well, and people that found you, are they happy that someone is actually catering to them? And, like, is there, yeah, I'd love to know how those conversations are going. Like if people are finding you and like, thanks for serving us specifically.
Yeah. So I had somebody email us a couple of days ago out of a contact form, and he emails and he says, look, thank you so much for writing the book. He says, he's from a Hispanic family, very heavily about having kids. He says, he was trying to figure out his own life. He's like, I finally found that there are other people struggling with this and it's okay. And that's huge. We've actually tracked it in about a third of our intro client meetings, first time meeting people end up in tears. And I was like, well, why? And I had to do a little soul searching on this. And the answer was because it's the first time they really feel heard. Because they'll go to a financial planner and say, well, I'm child free. And they're like, well, you'll change your mind. Or, your plan's the same as anyone. Don't worry. And they just get burnt because of the judgments. Or we can get the worst, they start judging, I had a discussion with a planner who was like, we need to have come to Jesus meetings with people to talk about their having kids. And, in case the clock's running out and how are they going to save their eggs? I'm like, none of your business. I mean, and that's the difference. It's not just the financial difference. It's the approach, the understanding, the accepting. There are a few other folks that serve child-free people, and not necessarily as a primary thing, but like they serve alternative lifestyles, LGBTQ plus, or somebody who does tiny houses, people that live in tiny houses, like alternative lifestyles, they fit. But it's just a matter of understanding, hey, the standard financial planning process doesn't work. And it's a group. It's one of the last underrepresented minority groups that it's okay to judge right now in some eyes. The politics around reproductive rights and all that are strong. And I mean, I had to change my firm after the Roe overturned for privacy concerns for my clients. There's a whole bunch of issues. And all of that comes across in financial planning.
Wow. I wouldn't have thought that people would have been that emotional speaking to a financial planner about that, but it does make a lot of sense that you're one of the only people that isn't trying to goad them into having kids. Like it's bad enough when family's trying to get you to do that. Now you go to a financial planner or some stranger and he's like, oh, you're going to have kids soon. And you're like, go fuck yourself. I don't want kids.
You're right on it. And we're getting it all the time. Okay.
Right.
So it's one of those challenges where, people ask what's the best thing and worst thing about being child free. The best thing about being child free is you have time, money, and freedom to do what you want. The worst thing is the other people's judgment. So I posted a, welcome to the company of an employee. I'm like, hey, so-and-so has joined, their CFP and this and the other. And social media is like, I'm praying for your souls because you're not having kids. And, why do you need all this? And so I made the mistake of engaging in the discussion. This was the last time I engaged in any of those.
Sure.
And his response was, well, you all have voted for these social policies. You need to have kids. So we have taxpayers and warriors. I'm like,
oh, God.
What is it like? That's why we need to I'll go on a financial podcast and like, well, if people stop having kids, Social Security is going to fall apart. I'm like, that's a problem with Social Security. That's not a problem with us. But all of this judgment comes and we have to deal with it. I mean, I was at a financial conference watching speakers. And by the way, talk about boring conferences most of the time, but all right. So speaker's up there and says, quote, working with people without kids is the worst. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I sent something to the organizer. I'm like, this is not right. Let's just kind of flip this out. And if that same speaker said, working with women is the worst, working with men, or any other group, the
Right.
whole conference would have shut down.
Right.
This example, when I went to the conference and said, hey, this is not appropriate, they're like, well, he should have reworded it better. I'm like, excuse me, what? Like,
Yeah.
what he actually meant to say was estate planning for child-free people is a challenge. That is true. That's not judging the group. When you say a group is the worst to work with,
Right.
that's the type of environment that my clients are getting from other planners. Then you wonder why they felt, like they're at home with us. It makes good sense.
That is super interesting. So I'm on my early mid 40s, and I'm from a gigantic Italian family, and I'm child free, and it's really interesting. The ones that are friends of mine who like have great kids and we have great relationships with, I have great relationships with them, but when they're getting older, you start to see like they're not recommending having kids as strongly as they were earlier on, and even the friends of mine that one girl in particular I love because she's always so honest with me when she just like hates being a mom that day, and even like I love my kids, but I want to just put them in a cage for a month or something like that, and one thing she said to me was really interesting was that a child behavioral therapist that she deals with to get advice sometimes said to her, anyone that works as hard as you need to work to be a great parent would never fault someone else who doesn't want to have kids because they would get how hard it is. So that's what I find really interesting in what you're saying, because we're surrounded with everyone that's having kids, and it's kind of like the whole religion debate as well. Like I don't care if you have 10 kids. Like I think that's insane, but go ahead. If you want to have 10 kids, have 10 kids. If you want to have one, if you want to have four. I still don't know if in my life I'm going to have them or not. But if I don't want to, you have no right to tell me if I should or should not have kids. Just like you can be whatever religion you want, you have no right to tell me that I need to believe in something. And so I this is more impactful than I thought it was going to be around the group of child-free planning. So I'm not surprised that you said before we started recording that just you talking about I guess accepting people that want to be child-free and plan and have their money, that people are so angry and engaged with your conversation. Like it's really fascinating that you're getting that sort of vitriol, but also I'm not so surprised.
Well, and the way I say it is, I don't get a vote in their life. They don't get a vote in mine. Like, that's just
Right.
kind of the bottom line. You want to have
Yeah.
kids? You don't care. That's your
Yep.
life. I don't get a vote in how you spend your money. I don't get how you, but you mentioned religion, so you get a kick out of this. So my wife and I went to get married about 15 years ago, and she had grown up in the Catholic Church, and we're going to go get married. Her family wants to get married in their church. I grew up Methodist. Sure, I'm okay either way. So we go to the priest. Hey, blah blah blah. You got to do all the meetings, and they say you got to agree to raise your kids Catholic. I said no problem. We agree to raise our kids Catholic. We're not having any. He goes, oh
Right.
no, you have to agree to have kids and raise them Catholic. They refused to marry us.
Oh my god.
We could not get married in the Catholic Church because we were, not having kids.
No
Now,
way.
they'll ignoring that it's a medical reason. My wife has a 50-50 chance of dying if she gets pregnant. So, we have a reason. But we went to three Catholic churches. Nope. Wouldn't happen. Now, I thought I was weird. And then I thought maybe that was 15 years ago, time. Some of the other days,
Right.
a couple months ago, same thing. Went to a Catholic church, couldn't get married because they wouldn't agree to have kids and raise them Catholic.
Well, you should just lie to them. They lie to everybody, so I don't know what the difference is.
Well, we got that feedback from family members. They're like, you should. I'm like, listen, I'm not Catholic, but if you lie to a priest, that's some circle of hell. I just don't know which one it is.
Oh man. Okay, so can you start different parts of the business, like catering to child-free kids? Like, do you have like an arm that could help them do more travel planning? Because on average, I'm sure child-free probably travel more often than people with more families. Like is that a thing you could do?
So the way we say it, we do what we call life and financial planning, and
Okay.
we integrate the two because I don't think you can really pull the two apart, especially for our folks. And the way we work on it is we work on simplifying somebody's finances so their life can be amazing. So a great example of this. Child-free folks have a lot of choices. That does not mean the what you should do. Like buying a house is a choice for a child-free person, not a requirement. Although the standard plan says you've got to buy a house if you're going to have any wealth.
Right.
Not true, by the way. And if you're going to move every 2-3 years, makes no sense to buy a house. We got people moving countries. We got people moving states. We got people, spending 6 months here, 6 months there. That's part of the life part that we're trying to do is plan with people. What does your amazing life do? And how do we simplify your finances so you can spend more time in whatever's amazing to you? Travel, that's a big one. We actually, if I kind of looked at the two biggest one on the life planning, it'd be travel and giving. And we often pair those together where,
Okay.
Somebody has a whole bunch of money. We're like, hey, spend 50 grand a year on travel and spend 50 grand a year in giving. Let's do an equal amount. Let's build that as part of your plan. The other thing we get into a lot is a lot of choice about how to invest in yourself, which doesn't necessarily mean like putting money in the stock market, but how about you quit your job you hate and go do one you enjoy? How about you actually enjoy your life? How about you make those choices now versus waiting till you get to the end of life? And, because if retirement's not your goal, there's no reason, okay, I'll slow down your retirement. Who cares? That's not my goal. Where we can really plan for life and let the finances backwards. I mean, clients will say to us, well, when can I retire? And I go, well, do you want to retire? They go, no. Well, then why are you asking me about retirement? Like, that's not the point. How about we shift and say, okay, you work 70% of the time. You take every third month off and you travel for the month. That's normal with our clients.
Wow. I can see how if you had like an Instagram page that had stories directly with your clients about that these things would catch fire quite quickly, because there's even a bit of a movement growing in the zeitgeist right now where I've seen a couple Instagram posts where a woman will say like they'll have a picture with her with pretending, do I want a ring? And then there's her thinking about it. And then there's all the things like, I don't want to take care of a house, take care of the kids, all these things. And then she decides I'm not going to get married, stay by herself. Or younger women are thinking of, do I want to commit myself to this entire lifestyle? Because it is a lifestyle, just like having no kids is a lifestyle, having a family, husband, all those things is another lifestyle. And people are deciding like, I don't think I do. I don't think I want to tie myself to having 1, 2, 3, 4 kids. And it's really interesting because I think the only reason to have a kid is because you want one and you really want to devote your time to that. Where I have a couple friends of mine and they decided to just have their 4th recently. And they said, which I think is, I don't know how you juggle 4 kids. I really have no idea. But they said they did a pros and cons list. And my friend was saying to me, he's like, yeah, but we put in things like time and money and that didn't seem right. And at the end, we just wanted 4. And they wanted to compete with some of their other friends, like jokingly that only had 3. And so like, I don't think it's a rational decision. I think it's more rational when people decide not to have kids. I think it's more of like a feeling and a pull when you want to decide to have kids. Are you seeing those sort of things with your clients as well?
Yeah. So the best I ever heard from a parent was, if you're going to have kids, it has to be 2 enthusiastic yeses. Both in the couple need to say, yes, I absolutely want to have kids. If one's like, yes, and one's like, I don't know, maybe, or we call them fence sitters, that's probably a recipe for disaster. Right. And I was like, I like it. And what we found is that child-free folks, I don't have full data, but just go with the concept, probably put more thought into not having kids than people do into having kids.
Oh, that's for sure. We don't need any studies there.
Well, so we did a study on this. We asked people why they chose to be child-free. What we found was that most people had more than one reason. And let me kind of give you some of the top reasons. Top reason, 38% was just never wanted kids. Okay, that's obvious. 30% said finances. 27% freedom. Then we get interesting. Environmental concerns. Some people just don't like kids. Medical issues, mental health, pregnancy concerns, family issues, career. Big issues. And if you look at it in the US, the group out of Michigan did a study. After the overturn of Roe, the number of people saying they're going to be child-free went from about 20% to 26%. So it's politics, it's health, it's all these reasons.
Whoa.
People are doing it.
What, and do you have any insight to why you think them overturning Roe would lead people to be more likely to not want to have kids?
Control of their bodies and reproductive rights. If you look at the number of people getting sterilized, vasectomies or whatever, after the overturn of Roe, went through the roof.
Holy.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that.
And it's not just a U.S. thing. If you look in Japan, about a third of the people there are child-free.
Right.
And now people go, well, but that's what's causing the population issues and the I'm like, that's a different problem. Like, that doesn't mean we should force people to
Right.
have kids. But what
Well,
we're seeing from the child-free population is the people that are choosing not to have kids have put a whole lot of thought into it.
for
It's not
sure.
like, I don't know where it's going to go. No, they have a good reason. Now, my way of looking at it is their reason's none of your business because
Uh-huh.
that's, their own choices.
Right.
And for some people, it's not a choice. And but what you're seeing is when you ask people, so I do a lot of this work, and I'm talking about child-free stuff. So I hear from all different type people, and they're like, "Yep, my first kid was just it happened, and then I might as well have two," and then like
Sure.
that's not the same thought process, And I'm not saying one's better or worse; it's just different. And I think what we're going to see, and the data is backing this up, Gen Y and Gen Z, the younger generations, many, many more are going, I'm going to stop, think about what I'm doing, and then make a decision. Where the older generations, like, you just went to school, got married, have kids. It's called the American dream. You buy a house, 2.5 kids, picket fence, and a dog. Like, it was just part of the culture, the standard script that says you got to do this.
Right.
Now it's much more like, I'm going to pause. And, whether it's getting married, 32.1% of childless folks will never marry ever versus 2.5% of parents. So, it all goes together, and you're seeing people just be more mindful of it. I really think, how old are you?
44.
Yeah, I'm 46. We're about the same age. The younger generations, the Gen Z, the ones 20 years younger than us, are much more thoughtful about their life than we ever were.
Right.
Like, we just kind of you did this stuff. You went to work, you did this. And they're over here at 20 thinking about things that I'm at mid 40s still haven't thought about.
Right.
Like, for example, some of the folks in the child-free community are saying, look, I'm really worried about the environment. I'm not going to bring a kid into the world who's with this environment struggling.
Sure.
And by the way, if I don't have a kid, my carbon footprint drops considerably. Because if you actually want to, people talk about like, I'm going to use paper straws. I'm going to, cut back on driving. Not having a kid has a huge impact on carbon footprint.
Gigantic.
It's one less consumer.
Right.
And it's these times. And I'm like, I wasn't thinking about that at 20. I mean, like, that just.
I think the big difference is as well is that there's an awareness. I think because there's so much information overload everywhere, like if you have a question that comes in your mind about the world, you can go and actually get it answered. Not to mention with ChatGPT now, as before, like I'm going to go down to the Encyclopedia Britannica that we have in our basement collecting dust and try to find out about what being a parent is like. And so I think, and this isn't the train tracks that we end up for so many different reasons, for the people we meet, the family we're from, the countries we're born into. And so if you end up having a kid at 25 or 30, normally it's because your culture and your environment puts you on that path. So it's not until you're like 35 or 40 and the kid is in high school that you're like, how the fuck did I end up here with this life? And then you start evaluating. And if you happen to be happy at that time, you're like, you know what? Or maybe you wait longer to have kids. You know more about what your life can be like without them. And if you're happy with your life as it is, as I am, it would be difficult for me to have a decision to have a kid unless I meet someone amazing that brings all these things into my life that makes it make sense. Then I think I'd be happy to do it. But like you said, there's so many people now that have so much access to what being child free is like, opposed to what being a mother or father is like. And it's go ahead.
And let's call this out. You and I are men talking about this. It's completely different for women. Okay, the societal pressures on having kids is just insanely different. And a lot of the folks not by choice. Really, it's a grieving process of the life they thought they were going to live, and it's going to be a different process. But also the people just making stupid comments. And I'll give you examples. So I worked in healthcare before this, and one of my staff members stops me in the hall, and she says to me, I've been thinking about you and your wife. You're both really smart. You need to have kids. And I'm like, I didn't say this to her, but like, who the hell do you think you are? Like, you're essentially stopping your boss and saying, I'm thinking about your sex life. We'll ignore that part. But,
well, you know what? And it's actually, it comes from a sweet place, and it's such a big compliment for someone to say that you and your partner should bring other people into the world. It's offside, but it's like it comes from a good place.
Well, I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure I'm going to buy in it's a good place. But
Right.
I mean, my thing is, what in the world do you think you're doing to say that to someone else? Okay. You want to go to the extreme ones I've had. You have others that say, well, you two are nice white folks. You should have more kids. So we have more white folks.
Oh gosh.
That's the extremes of it.
Oh
And that's
gosh.
the problem. So we did for International Child Free Days, August 1st, we did a billboard in Times Square. We sponsored it. We just said,
Amazing.
hey, today's Child Free Day. We're celebrating what it's like to be child free, blah, blah. On social media, somebody posted, said, we are part of a global psyop to depopulate the world. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, no.
Oh,
And this is all the garbage that is wrapped up in here. That just makes no sense.
right. Well, you know what? This show is actually a very safe place for depopulation, or maybe not depopulation, but less population. Like I spoke to the podcast host of the organization, Population Balance,
Mhm.
and they're saying that we're just already in ecological overshoot, and that we cannot continue this way with human beings. So I am kind of part of that group that thinks, man, if I have a kid or two, like am I part of the problem or not? Like I am creating a lot bigger just waste, carbon footprint, like however you want to say it. There is consideration to be had on what we're doing to the planet. And so yeah, I'm interested to track after the show and see how your social media engagement is doing on this, because I can imagine, yeah, women and men will be happy to at least have someone listening to them to say that it's okay. And like you said, you're not weird.
Well, I mean, we are weird, but it just depends on the measurement group. So everybody gets messed up on like comparing themselves to others. And this drives me crazy. Like by 40, you have to have done this. And by 50, you have to have done this. And this is like, what race are you running? Who are you running against? Like, how are
Right.
we comparing this? And what you realize is all of that is just bull. There's no rhyme or reason behind it. We're just expected because of society to do these things. And one of the things I get is like, well, if we don't have kids, we're not going to have consumers and the economy is going to go down. Well, first of all,
I hate that argument so
it
desperately.
well, let me kind of play that one out. So you're going to say and this happens to be U.S. based. So U.S. based economy always has to grow. We have to have more workers for Social Security. Well, guess what? You can fix that with immigration. You can adjust populations if you want. You go, oh no, that's not what I mean. I'm like, well, if the issue is growth and population, what you mean is you want certain growth and certain population. Like the judgments are just ridiculous.
Right.
And the only thing that constantly grows and takes over would be like a virus or bacteria.
Yeah.
Like that's what you're saying.
Cancer.
Constantly consume and constantly grow. It's cancer.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's not what
I
we
completely
want.
agree with that. I was actually had it written down. I was going to mention that, like this idea of a while ago, I was speaking with two friends, and they're in finance, and we were having this idea of growth, and you couldn't even bring up the idea of talking about, is growth for growth's sake a good idea? Like they acted like I just murdered somebody in front of them. And it was unbelievable that you can't even approach this conversation to be like, maybe we should make things that are more sustainable in general. Maybe the whole use case for commerce shouldn't be disposable goods. Maybe we shouldn't be purchasing all these fast fashion things that just end up in the ocean. Like the whole thing is insane. And I think it's kind of starts, and it's part and parcel with like this pro-natalist society that you have to have 2.1 kids, or otherwise we're gonna decrease in population. Well, great, there'll be less traffic. I don't like what do you want me to say?
And let me pull this one apart. So, I'm in the financial community, so I'm allowed to pick on our own people. One of the issues is most of finance, in investment finance, they're paid based on a percentage of the assets they manage. So, if they're paid by, let's say, 1% of assets under management, their role as a financial planner is they always want that number to go up.
Right.
That means their salary goes up. That has a built-in conflict of interest with child-free folks. Their goal is to go down to die with zero. So can an advisor who is being paid 1% really advise people to spend their money and go down? The answer is, I don't know. It's a huge conflict. It's actually why we charge a flat fee. We charge we charge 10 grand per year is our price, and it doesn't matter how much you have in assets, because then we can actually give you advice on, here's what you really need. Other things, life insurance, don't need it for child-free folks. I mean, there's very few cases where I'm going to say you need life insurance. Like basic assumptions just don't work. So
Right.
if the model is always your net worth has to go up, you have to make money off the percentage. If we're not growing and we're not going up, the system does fall apart. They're correct on that. That does not mean the system's right. Like that just
Right.
means
Exactly.
there's a flaw in the system.
Right. Yeah, I don't like people that become this enforcer of status quo in the systems that we built right now. Like, and there are people that want to, destroy everything that we built as far as like a centralized government, etc. And my point is always to say, like, governments can be good and bad. And right now we're in the modern era, the iPhone era, but we're working with a foundational system that was built hundreds of years ago. So we're still waiting for these two eras to integrate. So yes, we need more accountability with public spending. We need more transparency. We need all of these things. And so, kind of like in what you're saying as well, that like, yeah, we need to rethink all of these systems, because now we're living in a world that people do have more choices, like being child free. Contraception is a real thing. Women have a lot more power in Western society to decide, like, I don't want kids, or I had one, I don't want any more. This oven's closed. And so I guess one thing I'd like to go back to the finances a little bit. Maybe you can talk about where there are benefits financially for having a family, and disadvantages, and then the same side for child-free people.
I'm going to call you out again. We have a family, just don't have kids.
Fair enough. Okay.
Okay, so by the way, I'm pointing that out because that's
Yeah.
exactly how the pronatalist language is built into everything.
Right.
It's like you have a family or you don't. No, we have a family. Like give you an example is Society for Human Resource Management did a study on child-free folks in work. They found that child-free folks end up working more time, expect to work overtime. They have lesser preference around vacations. Like, oh, well, you don't have kids, you don't have to take Christmas. And I'm like, I got a family. It just happens to be me, my wife, and our dog and our cat. Like, but I also have mom and grandparents and all that.
And I also don't give a shit about this office, so I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I put in my notice 6 months ago, so they didn't plan. Not my problem.
Right.
And there are even benefits that I can't qualify for. So my wife worked at a university, and they offered free tuition for kids. So we went to her and said, "Hey, we're never going to have kids. Can I use it?" Being her spouse. No. You see, these are all the things that are built in it. We need good systems to support parents. I'm not putting that down.
Yeah.
We need equal for everybody else. And what happens is there's these assumptions that come because you have kids. So one of the common questions we get is, well, who's going to take care of you when you're older? Like, this is just kind of like the refrain. And I have a love-hate thing with this question. And what I love is it gives me an opportunity to talk about it. But what I hate is an assumption. That assumption is your kids are going to take care of you. So let me give you the numbers. In the US, adults over 55, they looked at childless adults and said, what percentage get any financial support from their family? The answer was 2.5%. So that's like nothing. They looked in the same population, adults over 55, and looked at parents and said, what percentage of parents get any financial support from their family? The answer is 1. Wow. Your assumption that your kids are going to take care of you is wrong.
Is bullshit.
It's just wrong.
Wow.
The difference is we know we have to handle it. We know we have to have a plan for long-term. My goal is by the time a client hits 45 to have a plan for their long-term care. The other thing that gets more interesting for child-free folks, and the one that's kept me up at night and like been my project for the last 2 years, is solving who is going to be next of kin for child-free folks from a medical, financial, power attorney type structure, an executor of their will. Who makes decisions for you when you can't? And the problem is the legal systems are all built around next of kin. And if you don't have next of kin, the government or the healthcare organizations make decisions for you. That is just not what I want. Right. Where I've got people, I got child-free folks in their 30s. I'm like, listen, you got to put a piece of paper that says who's going to be making decisions for you. And remember I said 32.1% will never marry. If it's your, you've been in a couple forever, you've been together for 10 years, you want your spouse to handle this for you. If you're not legally married, they're nobody without the piece of paper. So you have to have power attorneys, all that. So we have to all this paperwork to make up the stuff that's a given for parents. The other interesting one, kind of a side note, I forget what number, 17 states, something like that, in the United States, protect against discrimination against family status. Specifically, that only protects people with kids. You can legally discriminate against people without kids in most states.
Crazy.
Yeah, like,
that's crazy.
You can't say, hey, you can't have this house because you have a kid. But you can say you can't have this house because you don't have a kid.
Right. Well, I'm even thinking of like how many other things you can build into the ecosystem of wealth planning. Like you really could have a community, like even a one of those basic out of the box forums online where people can just meet each other in the same city that are child free to do things if they want to have more child free friends to hang out with. Like I think there's a lot of service that you can provide to your clients, and I'm sure you see day in and day out. Do people ever ask you for more of these services?
Yeah, we're actually building out a community structure because people are like, how do I find other child-free people? To give you an idea, if you look at the Reddit, which Reddit is a cesspool on its own, but use Reddit as an example.
Yeah.
They have in the child-free Reddit something like 1.5 million people. That's the largest online group. Now, by the way, I did some advertising in that group for my book, Portrait of Child-Free Wealth. First of all, anything with the word child-free got flagged as hate speech. Don't ask me why, just
What?
did. That's on Reddit. I don't know. Hate directed at me, hate directed at other groups by even just saying the word child-free. We'll ignore that. But I found almost half of my hits from that were coming from people that belong to the child-free subreddit, but also belong to the parents subreddit. So I'm like, yeah, you're not child-free. So, but let's go with that. Let's say that's the biggest online community. It is, with 1.5 million people. Well, 25% of the US is child-free. 1.5 million people is nothing.
Right.
There's 100 million child-free folks in the United States. That's nothing. That's a rounding error. There's not really these good groups, and part of it is it's not comfortable to talk about. I'm actually located in Tennessee, deep in the South, and I was in Mississippi. Deeper you get in the South, the less you can talk about being child-free. It's a political issue. It's a big deal.
Right.
So we're trying to find ways. We jokingly called it, and we're not far off, creating like a AARP for child-free folks. What happens to where do the old retired folks go to talk to each other?
Right.
And how do we have those communities? So it's okay to say, okay, I am child-free. I'm good with it. Because what really happens, so I do a lot of speaking and different things, and people come to me like in hushed tones, like, I'm child-free too. I'm like, you can say it. Our goal is we want people to be able to say, I'm proudly child-free and wealthy. It's okay to be proud to be child-free, and it's okay to be proud to be wealthy. Right. But it's like those two are like too like, oh no, I can't ever. Like, let's say it. Let's do it. Let's be part of it. Let's be proud of it.
Right. Yeah, you know what? I never thought that it was that much of a taboo. Like I knew how much we live in this pro-natalist society, and maybe because like I'm in Barcelona, and I have other friends that don't have kids, and I think I've seen people that are that are divorced, that are still single, that like they understand like the trials and tribulations of having children. It is not this smooth ride. So I don't know what people are talking about that everyone else should go and have kids. I think that's completely insane. But I never thought that people would get so much vitriol, especially you that are just saying like, hey, there are a bunch of people that don't have kids out there, and I want to help them manage their money, and they want to come at you like you're some servant of the devil. That's unbelievable. Well, it's very believable, sadly, but
So, okay, I went to buy software for my company. So I'm trying to buy software. I'm meeting with their chief officers. Like the software, he says, well, who do you serve? I said, that's kind of a normal conversation. Who's your clients? I said, child-free folks. He goes, oh, so you hate kids. And I'm
come
like,
on.
What? Like, I'm over here trying to buy stuff from you, and that's it. No.
That is nuts. That is nuts. Because like I take personal offense with that, even because like I love kids. I love being around kids. I love my friends' kids, my cousins, et cetera. And I think maybe part of me understands what it takes to be a great parent, and understands that it's a very long road. It's a very exhausting road, and there's a lot of unknowns in that environment. And like, I don't know. I have never found a compelling case yet that made me really want to say, I need to have this in my life. So someone to say that like you hate kids just because you don't have them, like, or that you want to help these people invest their money. I don't know, man. That makes me angry, and also kind of exhausted that these people are out there.
Well, and I'm not the only one. So one of my colleagues started a firm to serve child-free folks. He actually has kids, and he had to shut it down like essentially within a week or a couple weeks or a month, because he started getting shunned at church for serving child-free folks. Like, and I heard this story because I didn't know him beforehand, and I just heard it afterwards, and I'm like, dude, if you kept going, by the way, it's a great market to serve, but like, you got to be willing to like take those lumps, and
Right.
that's hard. I mean, I've had folks, so my next book's coming out. I'm doing a bunch of book tour stuff and all that. People are like, I don't think we can talk about this topic. I went to one press thing. I do a lot of press.
What?
So I was doing something on financial, and while I'm there, I'm like, hey, just FYI, I'd love to talk about child-free stuff if you have any interest. He goes, that's an interesting topic, but I'm not sure we can use the word child-free in print. I'm like, huh? He says, well, it's kind of like the word suicide. We weren't allowed to use that for quite a while because we're worried people would do it. And I'm like, did you really just tell me?
What organization was that? That is insane.
Oh, by the way, it is a large, old press organization. You'd recognize that I'm not going to shame.
Okay.
Like, you would immediately recognize the name. And I'm like, I give him credit for being honest with me, but I'm like, he went to his editor. His editor's like, yeah, we can use it. That's fine. But
Okay.
I'm like,
But
like,
fact
that's
that he
where we
even
started.
thought about it.
Like,
Or equated it to the word suicide.
Yeah.
Right. Well, a lot of this, I think, especially in the U.S., is very religious based from these antiquated sort of ideas. And there's that old saying that like, there's no hate quite like Christian love, where there's like this judgment to anyone that doesn't want to live that life that they live. And so I think it's really great what you're doing. Because how long have you guys been in business now?
So we've been doing this child-free thing for a little about 3 years, and
Okay.
it's catching on. Let's call it that. What is nice is, we're kind of pioneering an area that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
The downside of that is we're pioneering an area that doesn't exist. It's kind of like, you build something like you hope they come, like, you're hoping it's going in the right direction. It's just, It's overwhelming when you figure out how many millions of people need help. We can only serve thousands. And I'm hoping other financial planners start similar firms, do similar things, because there's a huge need.
And why did you decide to go for the flat fee opposed to the percentage? Because I think as long as it's in the contract that like as they start spending all of their money as they're getting older, that you're not going to let them go as a client.
But here's the thing: you have to, first of all, you got to know where the money's coming from. So we're called feed only, so we're only paid by our clients. We don't sell any products. But if you, as a planner, your salary is based on them having more assets, it's going to impact your decision making. You can be the best in the world. You can set a conflict of interest. You can explain it. Are you really going to tell the client to take $300,000 and do that once in a lifetime world cruise when that's going to lower your paycheck because 1% of that is yours every year for the rest of your life? That's the problem. The other problem is at some point it becomes unsustainable to take care of those clients, because our plan, our structure, we're working on right now, how to be people's executive power of attorney, all that. We're actually going to go from the day they start with us and to the day they die and literally bury them. Right. If we're going to do that, we have to have a flat fee that they're paying us each year just to pay for the services, because otherwise we'd have to scale back what we serve them in the end when they're getting less services to make it feasible.
Yeah, because is it tiered pricing, or is it 10,000 per client? That's it.
Doesn't matter who you are. You get the same service, same level. And we're intentionally doing that because we do not want people to be thinking about, well, I need more money for this or that. No, whatever's best for you, we get paid the same.
Right. Yeah, because 1%, if that's like $1 million in assets, essentially, if you're doing 1%, but and you're charging 10,000. How that's super interesting. Okay. And so like, are you able to operate outside of your state, or in the US, are you tethered to your state for what customers you can bring on?
We're an SEC registered investment advisor. We serve everybody across the US. The interesting thing is I'm getting half a dozen to 10 requests every month for people outside the US. We can't serve them, but how many people are like, hey, I can't find anyone else like it. And I'm like, no, go watch the podcast, because I can't, legally serve you. Because I have to be registered and all the other things.
Right. But
I have one colleague
for them anyhow, because you can't invest their money, but you can just take on consulting clients.
Not really. It gets really sticky, and we just don't want to cross that. I have one colleague who's looking to start a firm in the UK, so I'm hoping like other areas people do that. But there's also so many people in need of these services in the US that we need to focus there.
Yeah, because I would say there's a lot of expats I see that are moving abroad right now, so that might be an easy way to find them. Do some Instagram ads in Europe on the English channel, and you could find them pretty quick.
Well, what really happens is, I have one person who's probably sent us 6 clients because what they go is, oh yeah, I found a planner that serves people like us. Then they tell everybody they know
Right,
about it. You know,
right.
we're fortunate.
That maybe they're decided not to have kids, or maybe they're still considering it. What sort of things could they think about for how they spend their money?
Yeah, I think the first thing is if you're going to get help from a financial planner, ask them how your plan is different if you're child free. If they say it's not different, walk out. If they say you'll change your mind, walk out. If they say I don't know, I'm actually okay with that answer. And that's part of it. The challenge is to plan for your life first, then your finances. So, for example, we have a program called the No Baby Steps, the 8 No Baby Steps. And one of the No Baby Steps, number 7, is what's your plan for your parents? Are you going to take care of them? How are you going to do that? What's the structure? You have to have all of this planned out. And really, the equation is, does it make your life simpler? Like your finances simpler, or does it make your life more amazing? Those are the things you need to start focusing in on, not, what are the numbers. Like, for example, child-free folks hit what we call the child-free midlife crisis, 30s, 40s, which is when they hit their personal, professional, financial goals. And then they're like, what do I do with the rest of my life? What's my next 40 years look like?
All right.
And I'll be honest, that's a really, really hard question. I don't have an answer for most people. I'm like, let's work through it. Because normally you just pass your goals on to your kids. Like, that's kind of how it works. If instead you got to think about, what is my purpose? Why am I doing this? All that. That's the hard stuff that really having somebody help you work through is there. Finances can be very simple. We do simple passive investing, long-term investing, no big deal there. Not a big fan of rental income, things like that, because it's a lot more work. Simple investment, simple finances work. Now people go, well, can't I make it fancier? You can. I'm not going to give you more life. That's the balancing act. There's no reason to. People who die with zero can either could just do an annuity or a fixed income and run off the rest of their life because they don't care if it goes up. You can also take a whole lot of chances and swing for the fences because if it goes down, who cares? Like
Right.
you have a lot more flexibility.
And you mentioned you could get insurance for how to have long-term care. I didn't know about that. How does that work?
Yeah, in the US, the way it works is long-term care is all paid out of pocket. The government only will pay for it if you're on Medicaid, which is after you've spent all of your assets down.
Okay.
So you need to have private insurance to do that. Now, that's actually why some folks are doing the expat life and going to Europe where they actually have long-term care as a benefit, which is another way to have a plan for it. You just have to have a plan for it.
So sorry, did I misunderstand? Like, so you could get insurance at some age so that when you need it, you
Yep.
can get long-term care. And
Yep.
when do you have to start paying premiums on that insurance?
I try to do that in mid 40s. By the way, it's expensive. I
I
just
was
did a
going to say
couple the other.
that's a long time to pay for if you're not going to get long-term care until you're 75. Because does that mean like a retirement home, like an upscale retirement home?
So in the U.S., for a nursing facility, let's go with that. A single room, so you're by yourself, costs you a year on
Oh
average.
shit.
Men will spend 2.2 years in care. Women will spend 3.7 years,
All right.
and that cost is going up 5% every year. So the answer is we buy insurance to cover it. I just did this for a couple in the and there's options like you can pay every year for a while. You can pay 10 payments up front, or you pay up front. And I think it was like too much to buy it up front. You give them 240,000, you're covered. And they were like, that's a lot of money. I'm going, you're right. If you pay out of pocket, it's going to be $500,000. So which one do you want? And if you go, well, the government will take care of that from you in the US, the answer is no.
No, in the U.S. definitely not. They don't even do paid leave for mothers. Like
No.
it's such an insane place for that.
And what they do for long-term care through Medicaid is Medicaid pays about 30 cents on the dollar. So guess what? You're not getting the nice, comfy spots. You're in a room with 4 other people, and the care is not the best. Now, there are some decent facilities, but it's so rare, you're not going to find one. Like, you're not that lucky.
Yeah, right.
You have to have a plan for it.
Right. That's fascinating. Okay. Yeah. So people definitely need to start thinking about that even as early as you said, early 40s, mid 40s.
And by the way, it's the same for parents. They just think their kids are going to take care for them. Like,
Right. That's the most mind-blowing thing that I think has come from this chat, that because a lot of people will say, yeah, well, who's going to take care of you when you're older? And now the question is, who do you think is going to take care of you?
so I worked as a paramedic and I was in healthcare for quite a while. You go into nursing facilities, they're pretty sad. I'm just being honest with that.
Right.
They get visitors on their birthday and Easter or whatever, or Christmas.
Right.
That's it. You think your kids are going to be there every week checking on you and paying your bills? The data says no. And
Right.
child-free folks, we're actually expected to, oh, you don't have kids, you can take care of mom. That's just kind of like a standard statement. I'm like, well, first of all, no guarantees of that. So I talk to my clients about, what are your boundaries? Are you willing to support them? To what level? Are you willing to let them move in with you? Whatever. Where they have a plan rather than just, well, you can count on me, I'm going to do everything for you. No. Because that $500,000 for long-term care could completely derail your own retirement. You're paying for.
Go ahead.
You're paying for mom's long-term care, and you're not taking care of your own.
Right. It's such a shame that this really does come down to money at the end, and it is super sad to see that, because I mean, even like I do appreciate how I see it with my relatives in Italy, for example, where normally there'll be like a 2-story house, and then when it's time, because the Italians are historic breeders, the youngest child from that household, they'll go with their spouse or their family into the house. The surviving parent or both of them will move into the downstairs apartment, and then at least they live together until that parent passes on. And I really like that. I think like there's obviously pros and cons from having your parents or your in-laws in your house for that long, but I think it's more respectful to the older generation. But in other societies where like I don't live where my parents live, and my brother's not in the same city as my parents. Like, there's a lot of this moving around, especially in the States. Americans move states like crazy. So to have to go back from, let's say you're living in, on the coasts, then all of a sudden you have your mom or dad that gets sick in, wherever Missouri, for example. You kind of don't want to go back. You want to put them in a home to make sure that they're taken care of, but you don't want to change and uproot your entire life to go take care of them. So like, I'm really going to take that with me, how low that percentage is of kids taking care of their parents.
Well, and let's be real. You're raised in this Italian world. You're not following the system.
Right.
You're not living with your parents. You don't have kids. You're not enough. Like, that system has worked for hundreds of years.
Right.
It's not working now. There's still some of that, but it's more rare.
Yeah, not North America for sure. Like in Italy, it's definitely still like that. But even in, like, I would say probably more in the South, where there's less opportunity, a lot of the kids are moving north. So like, even they're not going to be in the same towns as their parents when they grow up. And that's like the motherland where this is mostly happening.
Well, and we're seeing people in the child-free community saying, okay, that's why they're going to build like a Golden Girls community. They joke around, but like a group of friends to do that for each other. We're all going to share our housing. It just makes sense. Like, housing prices, at least in the US, are so high. The answer is, okay, you have the first floor, I have the second floor, you have the third floor, and like, we share or whatever it is. And that makes sense. The thing is, the housing market's not caught up to that. Like different things. The one thing I like now, I heard this the other day, what they're doing is for a stay-in-home type of project for long-term care, you rent a high-end apartment. And when I say high-end, it includes concierge, it includes housekeeping, food, transportation, all the basic needs. And it's just part of a package. It's a little more expensive. It's a luxury. Most of them like running by hotel chains, things like that. You have this luxury package. Well, the truth is, they found that less than 5% of the people that buy these places or rent these places actually end up having to go to nursing homes. Because you really only have to go to a nursing home if you need dementia care or Alzheimer's. If you have housekeeping, you have assistance with the house, you have food, you have transportation, all that covered, you can make do. And it's to a luxury level. That's more of where I want my clients to end up, is in those type of places. Like, I actually heard one of them, I'm like, how old do you got to be in those? I'm like, I might move into one. Because it was just like, this sounds awesome. Everything's taken care of for me.
Yeah.
Well,
this is part of the conversation we had earlier about yeah, the system needs to change. And I think the only way to do that is people that are going to change it. And I even like the idea of like people building more communities, even if you do have kids, like build a community where, because it used to be a child would grow up in a community of friends and family, and you'd have all this input and help. And now this family unit, we've put so much pressure on it as societies that like kids are spending less time meeting friends because the parents want to spend more time with them. The parents are going out and seeing their friends less because they're spending more time with their kids. Whereas that was never how it was designed. Like we're
Mhm.
supposed to be in this like this culture and this community that you trust. So the whole saying like it takes a village to raise a child, that's because we used to have villages.
Right.
Now we've gone away from that. It would be great if like, Gen Z and, maybe we could be trailblazers, can lead the way in being like, I want to set up a community of my friends with kids, without kids. And so like we are live together opposed to having these siloed sort of areas. Are you seeing that at all? People starting talking about it?
We're seeing the child free community.
Right.
So I had somebody, my favorite answer, they were going to buy a castle and like make it like an attraction, and everybody has their own room. I'm like, cool. Um,
Amazing.
I think what I've heard from the parents is, the whole, it takes a village to raise it. Everybody's like, where's the village? Like,
Yeah.
where are, it's a good question. I don't have an answer. Not my, that's not my community, but it is a good question.
Right. Well, and before we wrap up, I'm going to say like that is kind of the community I see with my family in northern Italy. Like they're from the more conservative part of Italy as well. And so when my now ex and I were there a couple of years ago, you go around, you see, all the brothers have kids. They're all around the same age. They can hang out with the grandparents, and then everyone's family comes over, and like, oh, this environment seems great to have kids. Like it seems like you're incentivized to have kids because everything is so close, everything seems like it's manageable. There is this community here where we were living at the time in this expat community here in Spain. Like you're like, oh, yeah, I guess maybe we could, but
Yeah.
it didn't have like that warmness that made you think like that's the journey you want to be on. And so I just wanted to say like I'm really happy. Like I was curious, obviously, to have you on to talk about this, but I'm even more happy that there are people like you out there that are trying to serve people that are unjustifiably being judged for the decisions that they've made in their life. And I hope people have taken a lot from this, and I hope a few will give you a call.
Well, I appreciate you having on. I'm really out there trying to start a conversation. I can't serve everybody. I'm just trying to say, okay, how about you think about these things? And I
Right.
appreciate you being willing to dig into it.
And where can people find you?
Yeah, so childfreewealth.com is our website, Childfree Wealth on all of the socials except X. So they said childless folks should not have a vote. So we left them. Like literally,
Oh
that
my
was one of
god.
Elon Musk's things. And the Childfree Wealth podcast.
Oh my god. What a way to end this. Anyway, Jay, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thanks for having me.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you did enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.